So for the reasons we saw just now, HLNY is honored tonight to recognize and award Lenny our highest recognition, the Award of Distinction. Lenny, congratulations.
Thank you.
You know, when you speak, people always lock in their eyes and their ears always point forward. And you always seemingly narrate a story that draws out inspiration from your unlikely experiences. Could you share a few key things about leadership that you've picked up over the years?
Sure. And I think, Nick, maybe people do that because I'm a little controversial. I'll see what we could do tonight live. But the reality is, leadership is a really interesting word that I think people get confused sometimes. There's a lot of, real leaders out there, a lot of fake leaders or not leaders at all. I think people confuse over time the word executive with a leader, and it's true that an executive could be a leader, it's true that a leader could be an executive, but just because you have the authority, accountability, and responsibility to make decisions on behalf of an organization's best interest as an executive doesn't make you a great leader. Doesn't always mean that as young healthcare executives are coming up, that's a check on the box for somebody to follow someone. If it was about people being followed, everybody on Instagram would be a leader, right? Leaders, they want to not keep you beneath them. They don't want to keep you under a thumb. They don't want to delay your growth. If you're lucky, you may find leaders who even want to bring you side to side, but they may not be the greatest of them. The greatest of them are those who can inspire, set a clear vision, and align people for, the business that we're in. And we're talking about healthcare leadership. We're talking about compassion. We're talking about, people in their biggest time of need, patients, right, consumers. So it's important to look for leaders, and it's important to recognize leaders who are present, who are visible, who are in the trenches, who understand how important that visibility is, whether they're informal leaders or not. Again, we're talking about leadership, not a role, not a title on an institutional hierarchy. That's not what, at least for my life, that's not how I see it, not how I advise or mentor people when they're looking. And it's really important because, one day you or I might be in a bed, we might need something. We want the best people out there making decisions for us. We want them to mold and shape their style and learn from leaders. So again, these are, if you're really lucky, as I've been once or twice in my life, you'll find leaders who want to put you on their shoulders and push you up above them. People who could bring teams together and inspire a mission of your organization or a mission around a goal or project and get everybody to move in that direction. And again, if they could put you on their shoulders, if they could push you up, real leaders are secretly hoping that maybe one day you'll hire them if you're doing a good enough job, or if it's not hiring them, that you'll be making the right decisions on behalf of people, that you'll be making the right decisions for patients, and that your true north, like their true north, will be compassion and care and a dedication to never forget why we got into this vertical sector, game, business, however you want to classify it, but it's ultimately a craft. So those are some of the qualities that I've picked up around leaders there. They're also gonna be direct, and one thing with me, and this already about me, is I try to have a conversation I learned a long time ago with leadership, and even those who've led and mentored me, that what you say behind a closed door in a one-to-one might be very different from what you say if you have a couple hundred people watching you. That's not helping if you're going to remain completely politically correct and hold things close to the vest. Leaders want you to learn from their mistakes. They want you to live vicariously through their errors, not their success. They want you to understand that, you know, it's not just a snapshot. It's not just a Polaroid that you're looking at to say, I want to be this person or be like this person, but there's an entire movie. For me, my movie is 22 years long, at least, maybe 44 years long, but depending on which movie you're watching. But the healthcare leadership side of that is 22 years long. And you need to find people who are willing to share with you as much of the success and reason that people thought that, you know, I deserve this award as much of all those turns that I took were right. They're the ones that are going to teach you about the turns that they took that aren't and prevent you from making them. Because at the end of the day, we're in a world that ends up helping or hurting people by our decisions. So those are just, you know, some of the highlights. I'm sure we'll talk more about some points to take away from that. But that's how I view, again, getting it wrong along the way, getting it right along the way. First half of my career, I'd say I didn't have good mentorship, good advisement. It's why I try my hardest in the second half of my career to do what I can to contribute to an ecosystem that should be dedicated to making things easier for people in their time of need.
Yeah, that's great. You talked a little bit about making the wrong decisions. You know, bringing the innovation of thought and desire to make something different is frankly one of the best catalysts for being successful in your career. But what about risk, and how do you grapple with that risk that you mentioned in making those right or wrong decisions?
Yeah, you know, you've got to, it's a great question. The taking risk for me is something that I've always done. I recognized early on that, you know, I wanted to raise my hand. I recognized very early on, and, you know, I think my background and the reason I've been able to do different verticals is because I've been able to take risk. You know, I would say that the first thing is, and again, it's one version of the story, right? So this is what worked for me, but not, you know, fearing failure is really important. Really thinking about what that means and what is the worst thing that will happen. You know, we are in the medical field, in the clinical field, in the healthcare field. So, you know, failure is not a word that is a part of our foundation or something that's acceptable or talked about or tolerated. But the reality is that, you know, we do fail, whether quietly or publicly. And you've got to ask yourself if you're willing to experiment, if you're willing to, you know, do something different. And you know that, you know, there's more good that's going to come from that. Now, you know, with taking risk and with, you know, making changes and being a change agent, you know, and again, just being straight up about it, right? You've got to have tough skin. It's not easy in our field to bring new ideas to the table. It's not easy moving through different verticals. It's not easy raising your hand to take risk because, you know, we have in our world something that I've coined and joked around about, and you might have heard me talk about, but, you know, I call it organizational autoimmune disease, right? It's this amazing thing that we all have to deal with, whether we're coming up through the ranks or just getting our first start or, you know, reinventing ourselves, no matter what stage of your career that you're in, where if you want to try something new, if you want to take a risk, if you want to do something different, the enterprise, the organization, and there's no malintent here, it's just, you know, it's something that happens where they recognize you as something that may not be beneficial. May not be you, may be a project, might be an idea. You know, they may see it as something that may not be beneficial. They may identify it as a threat, like an autoimmune disease, well, and attack it, right? There's lots of different ways to attack it. And you've got to be, you know, thick-skinned, you've got to be savvy, you've got to have that person in a cave, that you know, that rabbi, that advisor, that mentor who you could go to who might be able to help you. But if you don't, and I didn't for a long time, you've got to develop your own skills around how to cure that, how to, within an organization, respectfully stand in the fray, stand in the chaos, stand in the middle of it all, and help people understand that, again, there's a common theme and a common mission that we're all after, which is ultimately, helping people, improving patient care, and doing the best that we can by someone who could be our mom or our dad or a family member or ourselves one day. And I've found that, the medicine for that or the cure for that is a combination of understanding what, an ethnographer is and an anthropologist is and a translator and a diplomat. Being all of those things is what's required to stand in the center of really being a change agent and understanding, again, once you take that risk, what you're going to be dealing with. So being a combination of those things, but again, just beating the drum here on a patient advocate, no matter what anybody's ever called me. I started my career as a nurse, as you know, student nurse, as an ICU nurse. I've never stopped being a patient advocate. That's my real title, that's my real role. And that's another component of that I think people really need to understand. And risk-taking, it's not for everyone, right? So, you may want to sync up with, somebody on the team who's willing to. You may want to hire for your weaknesses, right? You want to compensate for that. Self-reflection's important. I'm not, again, saying that everybody needs to move in a way that I have or play the chessboard that I have or take big risk. Everybody has so many variables in their life that are important to them. Economics is important, and family, and anxiety and fear in different times of their life. So this isn't for everyone, but it's a formula that's worked for me and how I advise people around it. So raise your hand, especially right now. If you're in New York, tremendous amount of unsettlement. It's just, we won't focus on that. There's enough around in social media and what we think about all day. But as a creative leader, I don't see that as an obstacle. I don't see that as something that you should run away from. The time is either here now or about to come where you've got to raise your hand, figure out how to reinvent yourself. And again, I think if you stay on course to the true north of compassion and keeping the patient at the center of what you do, you just can't go wrong.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's no chance of someone not making a mistake in their career. I wonder, from your opinion and your experience, what are the mistakes you see people make most often in their careers, and maybe perhaps those listening can hopefully avoid?
Yeah, it's another great question. So I think that for early career and people stepping into leadership roles, management, administration, the things that I first said around being able to discern and understand and identify role models, that's really important, because a lot of the mistakes that I see are individuals not being themselves, right? They are, putting a mask on or coming in or acting or emulating and pretending to be somebody that they're not. That catches up to you. If you're going to walk into 5 different rooms with 5 different groups that have different opinions about how something goes, and you're going to agree with each of those groups, you're going to find yourself in a room soon enough with all of them. And you're not going to know what to do. You're going to get exposed. So that's one big mistake that I see early on. The bigger mistake, and something I think that I've made this mistake very early on and then made sure not to moving forward, and was if you're paying attention to the person to your right and left, if you're looking at them moving up and you're getting focused on what they're doing and making judgment around why or not it's happening, looking at the economics or the value that they're creating or not and how they're compensated for it. If you're focused on that, then you can't be focused on yourself. You can't be focused on your professional development. You're not focused on your patients. And that's going to catch up to you. And again, that's not on the positive side of looking and identifying somebody and getting mentorship and advisement. I'm talking about being completely distracted. And I think we all do it, whether we do it, consciously or not. it still has the same effect, which is slowing you down, affecting your work, and distracting you to a point where you can't, drive the mission home for the organization that you're serving. And as we know, all of our missions are aligned around people and patients. So that's another one. I think I mentioned, living vicariously, through people's mistakes and not their success. That's another big mistake. Looking at that snapshot, saying, "Hey, I want to be that person," and just thinking you're going to wake up tomorrow, poof, and you're going to be that person. And not the case. I think you need to study, understand, speak to different people, surround yourself with completely different perspectives and cultures. Early on, you also don't really like being challenged. For me, I've had my bouts of that, and that changed, again, very quickly, even before I left bedside, where I quickly understood and made it, hardwired to be challenged. I love surrounding myself, with people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different perspectives. I mean, why wouldn't you want to do that, especially in New York, especially with the patients that we serve? So those are some of the big mistakes that I see happen.
Yeah, that's great. And, certainly we talked a little bit just now about the current situation, and, it would be hard for me not to bring COVID into this conversation, but I feel one of the biggest questions that a lot of people are going to get in interviews is going to be, what did you do during COVID?
Yeah.
What has the COVID era in New York City, or the world for that matter, taught you personally and professionally?
Yeah, so, we'll keep, again, we see so much on media, and, we could go academic on that, personal, professional. We'll stick with the positive side of personal and professional. COVID, taught me a lot, a lifetime worth of knowledge and different feelings and perspective. Personally for me, it taught me, when we're reflecting on New York, it taught me to be happy, to be proud of how resilient we are, compassionate we are, and how we can come together as a community, to curb something so rapidly and prevent more, death. Mentioning COVID, first of all, I know a lot of people are watching, and you and I are here. We're blessed. We're grateful for being here, obviously. But I should say first, just to extend, my deepest condolences to, anybody watching or anyone out there who will watch this who lost a loved one to COVID. We've got to make sure we don't forget about that. With that said, though, just on the personal side, again, there's hope for human beings. I think that was a big takeaway. Watching community come together was really important for me. And again, that could be on both the professional and personal side. But at the end of the day, community is really the front line. I know that our hospitals were in this round, but the reality is community should have been, and it's fine, and we did a great job. But moving forward, we can't forget that, and seeing how neighbors, the rise of our community institutions, watching public and private organizations step up, critically important. I think everybody watching knows that has experienced this and has gone through this, that there's a lot that we take for granted that we learned to appreciate again. And that's everything from, family to Amazon, right? What would we have done without Amazon? But yeah, it's really important to touch on that, because we all watched, the healthcare community in a dimensional way, not just everybody watching today who's in the field, but in all reality, all my respect and admiration, obviously it goes to, our clinicians and providers. It goes to our heroes. And when I say heroes, I'm talking about the moms and dads who became teachers. I'm talking about the teachers who became technologists and Zoom experts, right? Our emergency services and fire, police and sanitation, our truck drivers, our community at large, and our stores, and everybody who stepped up. And some of the more courageous, people that I think about as we went through this are those who were home alone, who didn't have family, who didn't have a network, who didn't have access to things, who were removed from, the very thing that makes us human, right? And social engagement, the ability to just, hug somebody or have access to a conversation. How did they get through that, right? So, these are all the heroes that I think about, and I really dedicate this award to every single one of them. I wish we could put everybody's name on the back of this thing. But that's what I think about on the personal side of this. On the professional side, this may sound funny, but I got to see a dream come true in New York. I got to see the big, bad competitive institutions, the provider organizations and academic medical centers of New York collaborate and not compete. It only lasted about 8 weeks, right? So, we got through, March and April, but by mid-May, we were probably arming ourselves again to compete for business and volume and patients, because the reality of COVID economically is that it left a big hole in the New York State healthcare systems, and we've got to deal with that. But I did get to see this dream, which at least for the last decade, I've been mentoring this way. I talk about a healthcare ecosystem. You know that, right? I mean, you and I are both part of it. We're both at, completely different institutions. But when I've mentored and when I've been mentored, when I lead, when I advise, I try to be objective. I try to remain brandless. I try to make sure that that individual is going to be happy, both personally and professionally. Because the last thing that any of us should want is an unhappy leader, an unhappy executive one day making decisions for people who might be us in their institution. So that's really, really important to me. But I got to see the New York healthcare ecosystem operate at a very high level together. It made me think about how policies driven around, collaboration and not competition could really lift and improve healthcare in the city. I'm a realist. I'm not talking about a single system. And I know, look, like I said, right, 8 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks maybe, we were, all friends. And we need to compete, and that's obvious. And we're different brands in the city, and we know that. But I got to see what that looked like, and it was pretty amazing. It was glorious. And again, at the individual level, not institutional level, it's why I think you see a nice group of different brands and people that have been able to help me and that I've helped. And believe me, look, mentoring, advising, all the people in that video, which just blow my mind, they're all from different organizations, right? And I learn as much from them as they think that they might have learned from me, right? It reinforces, what we've learned. And again, I can only share my voyage and my story if it works for somebody, great. But it really underscores the need for really good mentors in your life. I've been 22 years. I mean, the first 10 years, I really didn't have that, Nick, right? So I wonder, I wonder every day, and we're going to do more and more to try to cure it, but I wonder every day how people get access, to mentors that I had, earlier on. Good friend Connie Klepper, Lee Perlman, people who, really not only shaped my professional voyage, but my life. My kids, my family, my economics, how I feel about what I do, going in every day, belonging to an amazing organization. Like, it's so much more than just the professional side of having access to mentors. And it makes me sad to think about how many people just don't have that. So yeah, so on the personal side, that's some of what I learned. I mean, we could talk for hours about what I've learned through COVID. We won't talk about the academic side of it all, and then on the professional side, I kind of got to see what that collaboration could look like when we all come together.
Yeah, that's great. You did mention in that in those comments about competing. I wonder, how do you compete as a healthcare leader in today's COVID environment? Tactically, what can you do different? What can we do differently than others?
Yeah, I think touching on some of the stuff before, there's a lot of change coming, right? There's a lot of uncertainty in everybody's mind. Nobody could predict the future, but you've got to be willing to raise your hand. You've got to be willing to take risk. You've got to, definitely make a foundation block around community. Very important. I think the rise of our community institutions and hospitals was so admirable to watch and see. Pay attention to that. I think, that's a whole new world. But, digital, and then, diversity and inclusion top of mind for everyone. Obviously, the institutions are paying a lot of attention to it now. That's a whole other, topic. But why wouldn't you, as a leader, want to surround yourself with people who have different perspectives, different ideas, from completely different, cultures? And that's not just culture outside the community. I'm talking about within your own organization. So I think leaders need to prepare themselves on those kind of three fronts. Looking at community locally and understanding what happened, do a real postmortem on what we've gone through. Let's make sure we don't go through it again that way. Study it more academically and understand it theoretically, even if you didn't experience it practically. Understand and don't fear, and totally embrace and adopt digital. Support it so that innovation can then accelerate it. And then, how you surround yourself and how, you make health systems and, provider organizations and the healthcare ecosystem, more diverse and inclusive as we move ahead.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned community and diversity and inclusion. You've mentored many who are now rising executives in healthcare, and you've always quietly been an example to many as a person of color yourself who came up through the ranks in New York City. You started as a student nurse. What can be done to make healthcare in New York more diverse and inclusive? Is it needed, and are we doing enough?
Yeah, so it's needed. It's needed in the city, in the state, in the country. That's for sure. Are we doing enough? Never will be doing enough, at least not right now, but we're doing a lot more. I think that we were forced into doing more. Many people are now having a real conversation, which makes me really happy. I'm part of those efforts. I'm proud of what HSS is doing on this front. And, it really comes down to, listening, having a real conversation. You don't know what you don't know. You can't appreciate somebody's perspective unless you're going to sit down and not just hear them, but listen and appreciate, absorb it, and process it. And again, why in a melting pot like New York, wouldn't we want our boards to be more representative of our workforce and community we serve? Why wouldn't we want our C-suites and executive leadership teams to be? In my opinion, they're not. Our boards are not. Our C-suites are not. Our executive leadership teams are not. Our workforce may be more representative of the community. But again, if you were building your own company, and your consumer base represented multiple constituencies, and you were building that board and you were thinking about how to make that successful and optimize that, wouldn't you want the people at the table who understand and appreciate and can reflect those needs? And I'm not talking about selling cars here. We're talking about human beings. We're talking about life and the decisions that are going to drive whether or not people stay alive or not, and if they stay well or not. I think that it's better than it was 20 years ago, but that's not a compliment. I'm not sure. I know that, JNIHA, ACHE, I know that a lot of organizations have been, doing a tremendous amount of work to change that, and have. And I'm a result of some of that as well, especially, from Greater New York and the work done there. And teaching and helping, a lot of students through the programs there. But again, why wouldn't we want it? It's beyond common sense. So yeah, we're not doing enough. We have to do more. And I am happy, though, that finally real conversations are taking place. I know that's true in my organization. I'm sure it's true in your organization. And I think that it's going to make a difference. But this isn't about just painting the walls. It's not about the looks like part of it. This is all about the acts like part of it. So we should take our time, and we should be measured, and we should be thoughtful and responsive as opposed to reactive in how we approach diversity and inclusion and equity. And that goes across pay, that goes across compensation, that goes across so many different fields that these conversations are now coming up in. And I'm really, really happy about seeing that.
Yeah, that's great. You've held a lot of different roles in your career, most recently around innovation. And I wonder, you strike me as someone who is on a constant journey of growth. What's your next step?
Yeah, it's a good question. I love what I do. The Innovation Institute at HSS is really cool. I get to, come into an organization, and, innovation means a lot of different things. You mentioned the word innovation. Just to qualify it, it means a lot of different things in different institutions. For some, it's about operational efficiency. For others, it's a marketing arm. For others, it's about writing checks. What we do is we have a double bottom line. We have mission and revenue, and HSS is number one at what we do. It's all about how do we take the knowledge, know-how, intellectual property, and move that into the community to create models and services, to create products and technology that people all over the world could benefit from, and they may not even know that it's coming out of HSS, right? So believe it or not, through my entire voyage, every role that I've had, every step that I've had, and you mentioned many roles, but each of those roles allowed me to have a different impact and a different scale of influence on helping people. I love community, so as far as what's ahead of me, doing my best to serve the community, which is why I became a nurse, and and to this day, why I do what I do, to remind myself every day that that's what you're here for, that's what I'm here for, is patients. I sit on a lot of not-for-profit boards in different sectors. I want to be able to create as much impact as I can within universities, school for special needs, organizations that help with substance abuse and community, all of which I'm involved in. I want to continue to try to create a healthcare ecosystem, and in any way, shape, or form, see those 8 weeks that we saw become something a little more long-term and sustainable. We do a good job of it academically. On the business side, obviously we need to remain competitive, but I really believe in the fabric of an ecosystem, and at the end of the day, only patients and people are going to benefit from that. So I'm kind of committed to, I've learned in the last 5 years a lot around creative deal structuring and creating dimensional value. And that doesn't always have to do with writing a check. It doesn't always have to do with the monetary side. I want to take what I've done, put a lot of that, IP and thought and process in my network, and, surround myself as I have with people way smarter than me. It's the only reason that I'm successful is because I've hired people way smarter than me. And all my teams, your names are here too, for those of you through my career who are watching. But yeah, how do you focus that and concentrate that to help and scale masses of people who need it the most, whether that's through innovation, not-for-profit work, community, professionally. That's what I'm constantly trying to do. And one big way to do that is to make sure that those who are coming behind us, and those who are coming above us, and those who are running side by side with us are going to be real healthcare leaders who love people, who are dedicated to patients and improving care in New York and the nation, but especially in New York. That's what I think about all day. I think about how to scale the value of my network, of what I learned, and really, again, the access to mentors. How do you get young leaders and administrators and people entering our field access to people who will change their lives and therefore change the lives of patients by the work that they do? That's my puzzle and my voyage that I'm constantly trying to solve.
Yeah, we're excited to see what's next for you and what's to come. We'll switch gears now and go to the audience to take a few questions live. So please use the Q&A portion on the screen to submit your questions, and I'll read them out loud to us so that Lenny can help answer.
Uh-oh.
So this question here came in through Andy. What is your source of inspiration for innovation? Where do the ideas come from?
In healthcare, it's, I hate to be cliche, right, but it's necessity, it's need. The company that I helped co-found, Quality Reviews, that came from a simple idea. My wife is a speech pathologist and works in the school system. And one day she came home and I saw a site called Rate My Teachers, and I thought it was fascinating because I went on there and saw some of my teachers. I was like, wow, I can't believe they're doing this online. And I thought to myself, wow, I wonder if there's a Rate My Hospital. This was around 2004, 2003. And I went and bought the URL, ratemyhospital.com. I trademarked it, and I went to a couple mentors, some of who may be watching, and I told them that one day I thought that people could rate their experience online in hospitals and in healthcare, and they told me not to commit professional suicide, to erase that idea out of my brain, just forget about it, wasn't a good idea, So that was something that was just an obvious need. It was, what do I want for myself? What do I want for my mom? What do I want for my family? To be able to go and be able to advise an organization indirectly or directly about something that's going to help the next 5,000 people because, maybe there was a hair in a soap, maybe there was a wet floor outside, maybe there was something that could hurt somebody. Why shouldn't we have the ability to do that? Fast forward to 2008, founded that company, with Achan and Mr. And that company, I think, you guys use it. Every hospital in New York pretty much uses it. So I get to put my head down at night knowing that that technology is indirectly helping millions of people while I'm sleeping. But again, where did it come from? It came from, why shouldn't this be made to help patients? So my source of, innovation personally is from necessity. My role is to help innovators and enable innovators take their innovations and move them into the market to then help more people, to scale that, to bring ideas to market, knowledge, IP, and data, and figure out how to partner with companies and entrepreneurs, how to build companies or build technologies and take, what HSS has done in musculoskeletal and be able to scale that because, and especially today, right, Nick, what do people do? Before COVID, not everybody could come to New York, not everyone could come to the Upper East Side, not everybody could walk into MSK or HSS. So what do you do about that? How do you create, a parallel universe, and how do you push things out into the market that could help people at scale benefit from everything that we've done as institutions? So on the professional side, my motivation and my inspiration is coming from others who are innovators and thinkers. But personally, it's just coming from what I see in the market and what I think people need and how to improve and, again, make patient care better.
That's great. I'm gonna use the opportunity here to combine two questions here. Did you encounter racism through your journey in healthcare, and how did you combat and grow from it? And are there any exciting initiatives that you wish to see or are noticing now to address disparities?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think yeah. So the answer is yes. I've seen that, through my career. Prejudice, bias, racism, disparities in healthcare. All through my voyage, I think we all still see it today. I think a lot of data that's out there from the last few months support it. It's a great question because I kept my head down and I did what I needed to do and what was necessary because I didn't have, mentors or guidance early on. And it created a formula for me. It created a survival guidebook that I share today and I've shared a lot of today. It's something that, is really hard to navigate as you're moving through an institution without advisement. How do I believe that it impacted me? I don't really know. I know that I'm probably also guilty of it. As a nurse in the MICU one night, I was asked, "Hey, Lenny," I was asked by a physician who, we all knew each other, and he wanted to debate that night at 3 a.m. And he said, "Hey, Lenny, do you think you treat patients differently?" And I said, "No way, absolutely not, no way. I treat all my patients the same." And he says, "Really? You never have a patient who may remind you of your mom or grandma. You never have a patient who may remind you of somebody from your community. And I'm like, sure I do. And he's like, and don't you find that maybe you spend 5 extra minutes talking to him, maybe you bring him an extra cup of tea, you know, maybe come say hello and goodbye, bring him a warm blanket. And he had me. He got me, right? And I realized that was true. It was absolutely true. And, you know, that's where I think it starts. And, you know, you're talking about the year 2000 that conversation took place. That put me way ahead on my own self-reflection, on my own realization, you know, because of where I grew up and how I grew up. The other thing, and I'll make it about me and my own issues, actually, how I'll answer this question, that for the first 10 years of my career, I wouldn't advise or mentor, you know, or even extend myself to anyone who didn't come up hard, who came up in a hard way. And I'm not talking about color, I'm not talking about socioeconomic status. Like, I made myself the judge of some fake rite of passage that people had to go through before I felt like they deserved, because that happened to me, because it was hard for me. And, you know, in the second half of my career, thank goodness, I realized that I went through all of that so that people don't have to. I went through that so that I could grab somebody and say, hey, don't do this or do that, or here's how you do it, or let's sit down, let's draw a picture, you know, let's talk about what you're trying to accomplish here, and, you know, I can help you get there. So for the second half of my career, you know, that went away. And I learned, you know, also, even, look, I'm always learning, right? 22 years in, and I'm always learning every day. But even a couple of years ago, got into an argument with a colleague, somebody who's on that video, actually, not an argument, a dinner debate, where I said, hey,
Who is
the...
it? No, I'm just kidding.
I'll tell you who it is. And I said to Mickey, who course corrected me, I said, I think the, you know, ladder of success is the same. I mean, you know, people have got to climb it, and they've got to do what's necessary to get up, and that's what I had to do, right? And it wasn't easy. I didn't know anyone. I didn't, you know, I was born with a plastic spoon in my mouth. I didn't know anybody through this. And, you know, he challenged me, and he said, you know, Lenny, the ladder looks the same, and the ladder's called the same thing, but for a lot of people, the first 3 steps are removed. They're just not there. And again, right, I love being challenged. I love changing my point of view. I loved it. And he was right. And again, why did I go through it? I know now that I went through it so other people don't have to. I know now that I've been very fortunate to have the introductions and meet mentors later in my life who've changed the course of my life and my career. How do we help people get that much earlier on so that they don't have to do it? So yes, I've experienced it. Yes, I'm sure I've been a victim of it through my career. I know that, you know, I've been surrounded by others who have, and was raised by, you know, also strong female executives and diverse, you know, executives who've guided me. You know, the question is that I think all of us have to self-reflect. We all need to look in the mirror every day. We all need to ask ourselves what we're doing without even realizing it. And this isn't about implicit bias. Some of the more hurtful stuff is the stuff that you don't even know you're doing or people are doing to you. And you need to check yourself because, again, where does that all end? It all ends with somebody getting hurt who's more than likely a patient. And you don't want to be a part of belonging to, you know, a mission or an organization where people don't come in and feel safe, people don't come in and feel happy, people don't come in and feel valued and feel like for the value that they're creating, they're being compensated the same way and that they have a voice and an opinion. What good is that? If that's about, if you want to be at the end of that in a patient bed, that's really bad. So you shouldn't want that for your family or anybody else. You should do everything in your power to make sure that we change that along the way.
That's great, thank you. With our time coming to a close, I want to take a moment to also reflect back, having been introduced myself to ACHE and HLNY as a student member about 11 years ago, and especially during the financial crisis, I recall the stress of finding a job and the challenges of networking and finding mentors like you were talking about. The introduction of COVID-19 has once again amplified these concerns for students as schools are moving more to digital platforms and employment once again has become a concern. which this year is why I think HLNY is very much committed to ensuring that the next generation of executives are prepared to meet the challenges of the future, and really become those who will one day sit in the CEO positions of our organizations. HLNY is continuing to offer 3 individual higher education network scholarships, and we're going to offer 2 digital events designed specifically for students and early careerists this fall. Furthermore, I want to make a very special announcement that through the generosity of our honored awardee, Lenny Achan here, Lenny has donated a significant amount to establish the Leonard Achan Senior Health Equity Scholarship. And it will be available this September, offering 4 additional scholarships per year of $1,500 per student for the next 5 years and beyond. The scholarship will support candidates with diverse backgrounds and those who have a commitment to the betterment of the healthcare ecosystem, who will hopefully one day pay this forward. Lenny, I don't know if you want to say a few words about, the scholarship in general. And
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, through this voyage, I in the last 5 years in my work at HSS, I've done a lot of creative deal structuring, and we believe that it's not our cash and writing a check that creates value. It's the dimensional value of the network, the IP, the brand, the association to it. And as we've been talking and I've been thinking about my own life, the bottom line was, how do you get access to mentorship? And the big component of those scholarships is, it's not the money, it's that there'll be a commitment to each of those students that get that scholarship, that will be teamed up with a mentor for the first year outside of graduation, from my own personal network and my colleagues' network, so that we could jumpstart what might have taken me many, many years to do. Again, it was a beautiful combination of, I think it's probably the first of its type for HLNY, but it creates an evergreen fund essentially, where other executives can pay it forward. My dad died of head and neck cancer in 2007. Loved healthcare, loved the sciences. Came to this country and worked extremely hard, to create a life for us. So, between that and God and a praying mother, and we've been blessed. And I wanted to think about how to help healthcare leaders stepping up in the game to have access. So more than the scholarship and money, that's to take a small edge off of the financial burden. But the real value to the scholarship is exactly that. It's pay it forward. These are going to be, students, and thank you to the board of HLNY for allowing me to do this. But these will be students dedicated to community and diversity, disparities in healthcare, who have a history of it or a passion for it, and they'll then be teamed up with a mentor for that first year, who could hopefully not only change their life, but then change patients' lives and the people that they mentor along the way. So it's just a perfect storm of, something that, we believe we could do to help. And maybe, I'll be the recipient of that help, hopefully many, many, many years from now, when I'm in a bed somewhere and somebody's making the right decision for me. So thank you for letting me do that.
Most definitely, we're honored to have it. And hopefully we can add those 3 steps to the ladder that are missing for so many.
Definitely.
More details on the application page will be available on our website. We ask those listening from healthcare leaders to companies to support this effort with additional contributions and bring awareness to health equity. This is a need for raising and guiding future leaders committed to changing the health equity landscape in New York. So we greatly appreciate Lenny's efforts and all of those who are listening. On that note, Lenny, congratulations again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your generous contribution. And to all watching, have a great night, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everybody. Be safe.